Welcome to Monster Chats, presented by Monster VoIP, where we share the tools, methods, and best practices that business leaders use to build new connections, strengthen relationships, and impact sales in organizations of all shapes and sizes. If you have any questions that come up during today's episode, please text them to 424-378-6966. Please welcome the founder of Monster VoIP, your host, Colin Mitchell.
On today's episode, we're going to be talking with TJ Kinion from LearningFuze. TJ and I are going to be talking about job search, resume building, LinkedIn interviewing, and salary negotiation. TJ's role has allowed him to get involved in the community, and something he's gotten really passionate over the past 3 years is networking and community building. I'm Colin Mitchell, your host of Monster Chats and the founder of Monster VoIP. After TJ went to school in Boston and working throughout North America for 4 years in the tech staffing industry, TJ decided to come home to California. During his transition home, TJ and a friend had an app idea. So instead of paying someone else to do it, he decided to invest in himself and attend LearningFuze, the top-rated coding bootcamp in Orange County. After graduating, he was brought on by a program manager and leads career services, admissions, and business development for the boot camp. He loves sports, any outdoor activity, cooking, and is excited about the growth of the tech scene in OC. TJ, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Colin.
Yeah, awesome. So, the bio tells us a lot, but tell us your story. Tell us a little bit more, about yourself. And kind of what your journey was from going to school and taking the course and then, getting where you're at now with the boot camp.
Yeah. So I love this kind of question because it's one that we go over with the boot camp students a lot too is, the introduction. Tell me about yourself. And it kicks off almost every interview, yet you'd be surprised how many people struggle to tell their own story. And so, for me, I've kind of always been around tech. My dad actually was working in tech back in the 80s and 90s. And so we were talking about it nonstop. I didn't major in it. I did take a coding class, but didn't, really enjoy it at the time. And then having, graduated and having my dad had worked in tech, I'd, kind of been around it, jumped into staffing myself, loved, working and kind of learning what clients' needs were and, talking to these developers all day. And so when I left my role after 4 years and decided it was time for a change, I had this app idea with a friend where we were kind of bouncing ideas around and thought about an app for farmers markets and kind of realized that farmers markets probably don't need that just yet. But, not having a proof of concept and thinking about having to spend, let's say, $20,000 to $30,000, right. That's for a cheap app. It just didn't make a ton of sense to me. And so, man, if I could, I was talking to all these developers. I love building things. And so I decided to take the coding boot camp and found LearningFuze through Course Report and SwitchUp, which are kind of the review sites that give a lot of insight into what the boot camps do. And they were the top rated program, So at first I, wanted to do my research, reach out and, get to know them a little bit. And the second I stepped on campus, it was kind of just a change of, I guess, perspective from traditional education. It, it's a much more inclusive and open space. And, going through the classes was great. Loved building applications. Coding for anybody who does it, it can get addicting, which is a little dangerous. There are those late nights. And then after graduating, having gone and worked and having, had the experience in staffing and hiring, they, said, hey, would you be interested in leading our career services? Because that's what most people come to a boot camp for, is to get a job afterwards. And so I figured, why not? And it then gave me the opportunity to connect with the Orange County tech scene. And, I've loved getting involved with those, networking groups like OC Tech Happy Hour. And then recently, I actually, about a year ago, joined Startup Grind, and we've been putting on about monthly events there. So it's kind of been this really cool balance of being around these people who are learning, changing their lives, but then also allowing me to see the growth that Orange County is experiencing.
Right. Yeah. Wow. So did you build the app?
Not yet. No. So after going through and learning, because before this, I didn't know that MVP, how important the concept was.
Yeah.
And so then we did a little bit of testing, asked people, and the consistent feedback was, I don't go to a farmer's market to sit on my phone. I want to talk to family, friends, all that kind of stuff. And, they kind of, people mosey through farmer's markets with their coffee.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about like that, having the idea to build an app and then knowing kind of having an idea of what it would cost to maybe build it. And then just being willing to take that plunge of like investing in yourself and sign up for the course. What was that like? Tell me, about that process.
Yeah. So for me, it was definitely a lot different than our traditional students. So most of our students come to us because they've gone down a path where they maybe didn't major or study something in college that they find out they, wanted to do. For example, they study pre-med, they find out, in their first, internship or residency or whatever, oh my gosh, I don't like blood. Well, gosh, that could have been 4 years ago that you could have learned that. Other people pursued passions and then others, I hate the term dropped out of college because I think it has such a bad connotation where people just had to step away. And so now they're trying to get back on track. Whereas me, I came in with a unique kind of perspective of my goal is to build this application. The other way I looked at the way I like to look at a lot of different decisions in my life is what are the different outcomes that, I could have. So for me, worst case scenario of going to a boot camp and spending $12,000 was I don't want to code ever again. And I go back to technical staffing, but now I'm even better than I was beforehand and I'm going to be more successful. And that was the worst case scenario. And for me, looking at that, I was like, that's not that bad of a worst case scenario. Middle of the road scenario, I end up staying in tech. I can now use these skills and, maybe not in a recruiting standpoint, but take them to help, build a company. And, I think one of the things I'd like to, and circle back to after, LearningFuze is get to the point where I'm, helping a startup, build because I can understand both the business side and the tech side. And then best case scenario was, I build this app, it's $1 billion app and, I'm set.
And then the actual scenario, right?
Yeah. And then what actually happened was, they had a person who was doing career services and this is kind of the typical, I guess kind of setup for most boot camps is you have somebody who's doing it, but some of the time they're part-time. They might help you build a resume, tell you to build a LinkedIn profile, but they're not hands-on or they haven't hired anybody themselves. And so when they asked me to join, one, I loved the environment in the community. So I was like, wait, I can stay around these people for, even more time. Yes. And on top of that, it was able to allow me to build off of my previous skills, which to be honest, I was a little worried that I was going to kind of leave them behind, and say, wow, that was 4 years, of staffing and hiring and job searching that, I guess that it's a wash, but, I was able to combine those two and, what started out as career services has now morphed into the admissions as well. Cause we want to make sure people are ready for the program. Cause it's really, really difficult. A lot of different people from different backgrounds could do it, but it's not meant, for everybody. And so the actual outcome, it's led me to, obviously being still a part of the program, but then also once again, I love the connection with the community and getting to know what's happening in Orange County. Cause it does feel like I'm also part of building the Orange County tech scene, which it sounds weird to say that because you think of the Real Housewives of Orange County and you think of, finance or Disneyland. Very rarely do people think of tech when you hear Orange County.
So, tell me a little bit more about the career services, right? So maybe for the people that don't know, is that pretty unusual to have somebody that's like really dedicated to, helping people that have, completed the boot camp, then, find a job?
It's becoming more and more common. And, we see it with the boot camps who are a little bit more student focused rather than, let's say profit focused. Boot camps that have grown with investor funding typically tend to cut some of those, whether it's in-person teaching or the career services support to save a little bit of money. And so what ends up happening usually is there is a career services department, but they kind of leave it and treat it similarly to the way we did in college, which is you've got to come to us, find us, let us know when you need help. And most people, they feel weird, asking for help sometimes. And that's, I think, probably the biggest thing people need to get out of their own way when it comes to the job search. And, we talk about this in the program, and you read about it day in and day out, is network. We all have this internal network of family and friends where I hope when you call up your cousin or your aunt or your brother or sister and you say, hey, I'm looking for a job right now. Do you know anybody hiring in this industry, or could you point me in a direction? They're going to say either yes or, you know what, I don't, but at least they're going to keep you in mind. And that's one of those things where, we try to get students to do that as often as possible in the program. But it really comes back to this idea that people are worried about saying that they need help. And so the way that we look at it from, our perspective is it does require a little bit of more work on our end, but we're going to check in with people. We have students who have graduated, let's say 3 or 4 months ago, and they haven't logged into Slack, in a couple of weeks. And so we're going to reach out with, a Slack message, a phone call, a text message. Heck, we'll even shoot you an Instagram DM because we need you to know that we're here to help you. And we want to make sure that even if tech isn't, your future career, there's so many ways we can help you with your job search because they invested in us. And when you come to our program, our commitment to you is that as long as you are still working with us, as long as you are, staying in contact, that's really it. As long as you're staying in contact, we're going to help you.
Mm. Wow. And so once they finish the boot camp, what's kind of the process to get them ready to start, being a better networker, tapping into those connections and, start to get a job? Because with the current situation, I think there's probably a lot of people that are now trying to get skills that they didn't have before and kind of get prepared for this really tough job market that we're going to experience.
Yeah. So we actually started during the program. Our goal is in that 12 weeks, we want to teach you all of the technical skills and as much of the career services and even soft skills as well that's going to help you, land a job. Now, to expect somebody to be ready to start their job search on day one after graduating is a lot. We have the occasional student who can do that. Most of them need a little bit of time to kind of regroup, breathe for a little bit because they were just working their butts off for 3 months. And so what we do is we give them all the tools during it, but then afterwards they usually spend about 2 to 3 weeks, kind of pulling everything together. I would say polishing would be the best way to put it. They're making their applications that they built in the program really pretty. They're putting it onto a portfolio website because, if you're a hiring manager and you get a resume that doesn't have a CS degree or doesn't have professional experience in development, you're kind of going to be like, well, wait, why should I bring you in for an interview? Oh, great. You've got a portfolio. Oh, you've got a GitHub. And I can see your coding skills. So a lot of it's polishing a lot of that stuff together. We try to have them, once again, during the program. One of the things we recently had them do is I actually give them a form to send out to 5 family and friends that ask their family and friends for ideas of what they can build in the program because they're a little nervous to talk to people, but if you give them this kind of this push, this catalyst that says, hey, you're not asking them for a job. You're just asking them for feedback on your apps. And oh, by the way, because you're doing that, they're now going to keep you in mind for these other developer jobs that might come up, or maybe they hear, of a family or friend, or a coworker who's looking for someone to build a website. So that's the general stuff that we're covering in the boot camp. For people that are doing a boot camp or just a job search, in general on their own, and, we're seeing obviously record unemployment numbers. And so for anybody out there who's getting ready to do that, as I said, first things first, talk to your network. Go back to start with your family and friends because they're what we like to call evangelists. They should be willing to help you no matter what. Then go to past coworkers, if you've worked at other companies, college, classmates, stuff like that, even tapping into your local parish or your religious group that, you're involved with. So let them know. So start by getting people on the radar, getting on people's radar, I guess would be the way to say it. And then you're going to want to put together what is needed for your job search. So what I like to look at the job search is kind of like a pyramid, you've got your foundation, and your foundation is all of your branding, your resume, your LinkedIn profile. If you're in a industry that has an opportunity to show a portfolio of your work, try to put that together. Photography, videography, coding, design, heck, even just coaching, stuff. You put a website out there because it's going to separate you a little bit more. Work on, a few different cover letters, and have some of those ready, but don't use a copy and paste templated one. And now you've got your foundation and your branding in place, so that now when you start applying, when your application finds the person's eyes, that, whether it's a recruiter or a hiring manager, they can now see who you are. Because one of the things a lot of people don't realize about the job search is what goes on from the other side. So you post a job, you're going to get, on average, 150 to 250 resumes. Smaller companies or tougher positions might be a little bit less. Larger companies a little bit higher. 75% of those resumes never see a human eye because of an applicant tracking system. So by the time you've gotten to somebody, you need to make sure that you're going to stand out, because you, Colin, have a job to do. You have a 40-hour-a-week day-to-day thing.
Can we go back for a second?
Yeah.
So 75% of those never get to a human eye because of the applicant tracking, right? So what stops those from getting through?
Yeah, so easiest way to think about applicant tracking systems are kind of like your Finder or Control F on your computer. You want to find something on a document, you say, let's say you're hiring for a web developer, you type in JavaScript, and it's going to highlight everywhere on that resume that person has JavaScript. So it's pretty much that on steroids. So as a hiring manager, let's just continue to use a developer example, you're going to put in the key terms that you need to see on the resume. Outside of that, applicant tracking systems allow people to also filter degrees, years of experience. And the tough part with that is certain resume formats, certain, placements of keywords and everything could make or break your possibility of getting past it. So for example, submitting a resume in a PDF format is less effective than a Word doc, because sometimes the applicant tracking systems may not properly scan a PDF. It's getting better nowadays. That was more of an issue back, about 4 or 5 years ago. But on top of that, keyword, usage, this is one of the reasons why, job seekers and coaches constantly say, tailor your resume to the job, because changing the term from developer to programmer could be the thing that, pushes you over the edge. I like to talk to the students about reverse engineering your resume and your LinkedIn based off of the jobs you're interested in.
A good question. And I'm not an expert on this, but would you suggest them tailoring the resume specific to verbiage or language in the job description? Like, not just sending the same resume to everybody, but if it says, they're looking for Python, then have Python appear in your resume many times, so that when they find it, it's like, oh, this guy must really be an expert in Python.
Yeah, and it's not just the language itself, but it's the concepts within that language. So, for example, if it's a job in Python and you're talking about dictionaries, you're using a term that is specific to Python, whereas if you're talking about JavaScript and you're talking about objects, now you're talking about the same thing, right, but they're specific to that role. So, for example, with, you could have AWS, but you also need to have the terms cloud and deploy, on there. Instance might be another, good one to have. So I suggest that the students, it feels weird doing that, because, it slows down the number of applications you get out, which that's what worries people is, I only got out 4 to 5 applications today. Well, if those 4 to 5 applications were high quality and tailored, you're going to get a few more responses rather than just one click applying, and you're blasting it out where, maybe you send 10.
So quality is more important than quantity.
Absolutely.
When job searching. So even if the job posting says programmer or developer, then change your resume to match what they're looking for. Yeah. And maybe be a little bit more specific about the ones that you apply to.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And the way I like to look at it and talk to the students about it is look at it as kind of, a balance. Yes, get some resumes out there that are more of just that numbers game. So for our students, because they're typically going to roll into and start in a junior developer role, if you see a position that says 3 to 5 years of experience, and you only hit, let's say, 50% of the languages, yes, still apply because you still have a really good chance of possibly getting an interview, but don't spend 20 to 30 minutes updating your resume, tweaking everything and matching every word. Use the template that you have, or let's say the web developer one, tweak it up a tiny bit and then send it out. Now you find a job posting that is here in Orange County. Let's say it's in Irvine. It's, off of, Irvine Spectrum Drive. It turns out it's right around the corner from your house, and you hit 75% of the job description and it's a junior role. I would say spend 30 minutes, maybe even up to an hour, putting in the time. Now, the other thing you want to do is you don't want to lose that investment in time by just sitting there and saying, hey, that was good. Now let's let the forces that be, follow up, or reach back out to me. No, follow up with that company. Try to make a connection maybe with somebody on LinkedIn. That's another thing. I think job seekers get worried about bothering, hiring managers, where there's definitely a line. But if somebody's following up with you and saying, hey, Colin, I applied, just wanted to make sure you got my resume. Love to hear, look forward to hear back. If you need anything else, let me know. And then they call a week later, or they shoot you an email. That's persistence. Now, if they call in and they say, hey, Colin, I applied, when are you going to set up the interview? Now you're a little bit bothered. But persistence is something we love from employees. You want your salespeople to be persistent.
You got to put your sales hat on, right? Yeah. You're like, and sales, sales, you got to break through the noise, right? How are you going to be different? How are you going to be unique? How are you going to be persistent, consistent, right? So, not in sales, if you just sent emails all day and just sat back and hoped that people were going to, sign up for your service or buy your product, you'd be broke.
Yep.
Right. So if you just apply to, just send the same resume to everybody, and sit back and hope that you're going to get a job, maybe you get lucky. Right. But if you take more time, you be unique, you be different. You said, build a website, with your portfolio, something different that people maybe aren't doing. Send that resume, polish it to be more specific, more personalized to the role. Send a note, a handwritten letter, a LinkedIn request, a phone call. Do you think that yours is more likely to be viewed? Probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gets back to these statistics and what is going on the other side, of the screen, essentially. So for us, it's easy to look at a job description, see it on it. Let's say it's Indeed. They see it on Indeed. It looks great. One click apply. That's my job. That's me. They wrote it for, me. Well, guess who's saying that? Every other person who just graduated from a boot camp, people who haven't graduated from a boot camp, because guess what? Indeed isn't stopping them from one click applying. I have issues with Indeed and ZipRecruiter and their marketing because it's very misleading. Indeed calls themselves the #1 job site in the world, yet the vast majority of their postings are either expired or, outdated. And so, they have a ton of jobs, but those jobs aren't actually hiring.
But they're almost hurting the job seekers, right? Because they're making the applying process so simple, so easy that they think that's all you have to do.
Yep. Yeah. And that's where, it's funny because you constantly hear about whether it's, once again, a website or a platform that's going to fix the hiring process. It's not going to happen because at the end of the day, I still need to look at a resume. I still need to talk to somebody, who's sitting across the table from me. And I still have work to do on my own on a day-to-day basis that is going to slow that process down. And that's where, once again, until a job seeker says, what is going on in Colin's life? What is his day-to-day? How can I make myself stand out even more? Because guess what? He just got 50 applications. How do I be the one that's a little bit more memorable? And then throughout the entire process, how do I constantly separate myself from other candidates? And one of the things you mentioned that I absolutely love, and I've had so many students and hiring managers follow up about this, is the thank you cards. Handwriting a thank you card is the easiest way to stand out in a job search because nobody does it anymore. And, you know, even if you're on the fence, like imagine being on the fence about a candidate and now you get a handwritten thank you card. You're like, heck, I don't even think TJ's the right guy, but we're going to bring him in just to talk again because he did that.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I know we spent a lot of time on this, but I think it's a really important topic because obviously there's gonna be a lot of job seekers right now, right? So, do you guys track anything as far as like paying attention to like how many jobs there were before, you know, COVID-19 and how many there are now? And do you guys track or pay attention to any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I'd say more of pay attention because tracking is difficult because if you, let's say you sign up for the alerts and you're trying to update that each day, it's either the same job, you know, that they just reposted or it's an old job that companies just leave open because a lot of companies that have roles that they're constantly filling. I like to call this kind of the revolving door, which is a little bit of a red flag. You kind of want to ask, why has this been posted for 30 days? What we're seeing is obviously there's no question about it. There is a dip in new jobs that are being posted. And in addition to that, there has been a slowdown in the number of interviews that students are getting. Now, with that being said, we do have students who are still getting interviews and actually had a student yesterday who got a job offer. And it's because of the fact that he is staying active. He went outside of Indeed and ZipRecruiter. He went I really liked what he did. He got creative. He went to Meetup. He went on Meetup and he found local groups in the area. And even if he hadn't been to an event yet, he reached out to some of their organizers and the people there and started to connect with them through that. And then that led to some of these interviews, you know, and ultimately an offer. So there's definitely a slowdown, but the worst thing that people can do is just stop. You know, you can't say, woe is me, you know, I'm not going to find a job because guess what? There's somebody else waiting in line right behind you to take that position. And that is the toughest part about the job search is you're going in, it's like sales. And I think one of the reasons salespeople are a little bit more effective with their job search is they're used to hearing no. You know, so you have to go into a job search with the mindset and the realistic, you know-ness that you're going to hear no. You're not going to hear back from people. You know, you're going to interview with a company. It's going to feel great. And then they're going to email you 2 or 3 days later and say, hey, we moved forward with someone else. And you just there's so many factors out of your control. What you can do, though, is you can control your activity. You can, you know, make sure that you have a game plan in place. Another thing that I think is really important to have for your job search is kind of fallback things that you know, everybody has these tough days. And, you know, what do you do when you know, have a project that either just you lose the bid on it, or let's say, you know, you have something happen at work and everything, you know, feels like it's falling apart. You know, what do? Do you go grab a beer and you kind of decompress for a little bit? Do you go for a run? Do you go for a swim? Have those ready, because the worst thing to do is to hear back from an interview, you know, get rejected after 3 rounds. And then you go, shoot, you know, I should probably stop for a few days. No, you know, take a break, group and everything, but then get back on the horse and, you know, get back at it, because once again, everybody else is still doing it.
Right. Yeah. And then also a few other things I think you said too is, you know, be consistent, obviously, right? Try to be different or unique, right? And think, I love that. You know, he went to the Meetup group and found organizers. Like, be creative, think outside the box. Don't just do what everybody else is doing. And these things all apply to all job seekers, not just job seekers in tech. These are like really helpful things that I think people really need to hear right now.
Yeah. And you know, what's funny is, you know, people think, because this is another thing is, you know, you say be creative or, you know, separate yourself. And some people are like, well, gosh, I don't know how to do that, or I'm not a creative person. And part of it actually isn't being creative or separating yourself. It's just doing a little bit more. So let's say you're prepping for an interview. Most people are going to go look at the job description and, you know, study that. And that's about it. Well, if you look at the job description, you go to the interviewer, look at, Colin's LinkedIn profile, get to know Colin, maybe find that Colin has done, an interview before with another podcast. And now I know a little bit more about you. Not only can I come in and connect with you a little bit better, but if I've done my prep on the job description, on the company, I can now ask questions that show that I've done my research. And that's another easy way to separate yourself from most other candidates.
And
a lot of people just go through the motions.
And it seems simple, but it's honestly crazy. Most people are not doing that.
Yeah.
So when people do, it really stands out.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's something that I learned pretty early on. I actually can still vividly remember the interview that I had back in the Boston College Career Center, which was a house. And in the attic of the Career Center, I had an interview with GE Healthcare. And during the interview, even before the interview, they said, you're going to go into, the sales training program, but you're not going to be assigned a specific unit. And I go, okay, cool. Well, I don't need to study the different units. And I go into the interview, and in the interview, they asked me, and they said, well, which unit are you most interested in working in? Or what would your top 3 be? And I just realized, I go, oh my God, like I could have spent 15 minutes scanning through those, and I would have had an answer to that. And that I started sweating immediately because it was a panel interview too. It was humid, and I think it was like May or something, getting ready to be summer in Boston. And I go, I'm never going to go into another interview without prepping and looking as much up about the role and the company and the people as I can, because this is one of my favorite things is nobody has ever left an interview and said I was over prepared. What they say instead is, wow, I did well, or that was a great interview. But people do leave an interview and say, I wish I'd studied a little bit more.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about getting a coding education, right? So when, somebody, and I think we talked about this a little bit before, right? There's people coming from different, people that are maybe college wasn't for them, people that maybe graduated college and then they're like, hey, I don't really love doing what I thought I'd love doing. And then maybe even people who, didn't go to college at all, and you're also seeing, a younger generation of people start to sign up for the boot camps as well, right? So what are their options for getting a coding education regardless of where they're coming from?
Yeah. So the thing that we always suggest to people is, start with some of these online tutorials. There's some amazing websites out there. And before you spend the money, and the investment in a boot camp, make sure you enjoy it. And, for example, like Pluralsight is offering all of their courses for free right now, which is super great. I believe Coursera might be doing something similar. You have Udemy, which is, I think most of their classes are only about $10. So, make sure that you and get as far as you can on your own before then saying, you know what, I need somebody else and I need, I need to pay and invest in this extra, bit of, I guess kind of not bit, but a lot of money and time. And then of course you want to look at kind of what your goals are. If your goal, and where most coding boot camps, specialize, is your goal is to get into a web development or software engineering job, and that that's what you want to do, well, then be very intentional about it and make sure you put, everything in place. And then of course, do your research, on the boot camps, because even though I would say, hey, everybody come to LearningFuze, there's a ton of amazing boot camps out there. There are also some programs that are kind of just more in it for the money, and they're taking a lot of people in that probably shouldn't be doing a boot camp. And that's where you see these negative reviews and articles about people who felt that they were wronged. But I would say, one, look at the boot camps, obviously reviews that are out there, talk to alumni, who have gone there, get an idea as to how much work it was for them to go and to do that. Because that's another thing I think some people don't realize is how much work a boot camp is and how much work it is to learn, this technical stuff, because it's really easy to look out and say, oh, my cousin did this, or, my friend from college did this, or my fraternity brother did this. And what they don't tell you is how difficult it was. They tell you what they enjoyed about it. But very rarely do they tell you that they sat up at night scratching their head wondering if this was even for them, because they were going through the valley of, despair, and they're experiencing all the different levels of imposter syndrome. So I think looking into, boot camps, looking into training, programs, I guess the best term to use is upskilling right now. LinkedIn Learning has a ton of great resources. One of the cool things about LinkedIn Learning's resources too is you can actually add the certificate to your profile.
Oh, nice.
Which, the certificates hold a little bit of weight, but I look at them as more as they show you that you're passionate and interested in it.
Yeah. And they just show that you actually are investing in yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the process of like somebody coming to you guys and trying to figure out, hey, are they a right fit as a student for you? is LearningFuze the right fit for them? Like, what is that kind of evaluation process like?
Yeah. So I think the thing you brought up was perfect, which is, we need to make sure it's a right fit for both of us, because there are other options out there. And if we're not the right one, the last thing we want to do is bring you in, take your money, and now you're having a poor experience, because that was just, it's not going to look good on us either.
Right.
So what we do is we offer a few different kind of avenues for people to kind of what we like to say, get to know us. So we have our weekly info sessions, which are the equivalent of an open house, and somebody can kind of come in, hear about what we're teaching, see some of the student projects, look at the curriculum, and hear about our instructors. So there's those every Wednesday evening and Wednesday morning. We also have some different ones for our part-time classes and our UX class that we have too. And then we have the part-time classes, which are these little 2-week prep classes where somebody can take, it's about 1 to 2 hours of work, per day. And you're learning the basics of HTML and CSS. And it's a great opportunity. So if people come to our info session, they can take one of those classes for free to kind of dip their toes in the water and say, do I enjoy coding? Is LearningFuze the right environment for me? Do I like their teaching style and, the way they're delivering the curriculum? And then if they do decide that this is something they want to invest in, we then have an in-person interview with them. And during the interview, we want to look for much more of kind of the soft skills, because the soft skills are not only what hiring managers value more. According to a LinkedIn survey a year ago, it was 92% of hiring managers value soft skills as much, if not more, than hard skills. And it's because hard skills are easier to teach. We can't teach you to show up on time. And if that's going to be an issue before even the classes start, what's that going to, mean for during the program? We can't teach you to be passionate about coding. And if you're not passionate about coding, how are you going to invest 8 hours a day in just doing this?
Yeah.
And then imagine the job search where you're telling people, I love coding. Yes, I want to do this. So we do an interview. One of the other big things that we look for, and I'm a huge, believer in, is grit. Angela Duckworth, I think, has, not only, of course, her TED Talks, her website, and her book, which, dive into it. And it's just such a great identifier for something that the students are about to do. They're telling us they're following a passion. They're telling us they're hardworking. Well, when have you done that in your past? When have you gone through something that you felt like, wow, this is the most I've ever done? And we need to make sure that you're ready for this, because it's easy for somebody, once again, to sit at home and do maybe 4 to 5 hours of kind of a tutorial of coding, enjoy it a little bit, but 8 hours a day for 12 weeks, it's a lot to commit to. And we don't want to see people burn out. So how do you gauge if they have grit? Yeah, that's always a fun one. So I like to have pretty informal interviews. Want to ask kind of what people's backgrounds are. And sometimes it's just like, it's a given that they have grit. They're a former, veteran, and they've served, and so that they've been through a boot camp before, and they've been through people who have really laid into them and told them, some pleasant feedback. And you're like, cool, you're going to be ready for us to give you soft feedback. So there's some of those that are easy to stand out. It's maybe the person who, the woman who was working full time and getting her master's degree in the evening, and that was a total of 14 hours of work per day. That's going to be something that's going to help identify that. Now, for people who don't have a more traditional, kind of grit experience, it comes down to asking about accomplishments that they're proud of. Things that they've tried, they've gone through, and they've maybe failed at, and what did you do when you failed? So when is the time that you've overcome, a challenge? What is something that you're proud of? I had one student who said that his biggest accomplishment recently was climbing Mount Baldy. And for some people, you look at that and you say, well, gosh, people do that every day. Well, he trained for it. He spent time making sure that he was going to be ready for it. He game planned things because he had a friend who didn't, make it all the way up. And he's like, that's not going to happen to me. And so, it's more about kind of these questions of, once again, when have you done something that you really had to focus and really lock in on? Yeah. Another one that I like to ask is, what do your family and friends say about your decision to do a boot camp? Because if they're questioning it to the point of, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, or if you aren't even looking to them to get their feedback, well, that's a little bit of a red flag too, because it sounds like you don't have the support system that you need. And it's really difficult to come home every day and to have, whether it's your significant other or one of your parents saying, TJ, why are you doing this? You should be working and doing this because you need to make money right now. Well, it's going to be hard for me to focus and, make it through the end of the program.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break just to tell you a little bit about what we do here at Monster VoIP. We help companies save 30 to 50% off their current business phone bill and provide them more value and features in the process. If you'd like to learn more, you can text us at 424-378-6966. TJ, we've talked a lot about job search, which is going to be super helpful for a lot of people right now. You kind of, told us a little bit about the evaluation process and things like that, and, what resources there are to start to get some education or see if coding is something that you're passionate about. But tell me a little bit, when we first started, you talked about really building the community in Orange County, right? And really trying to be a part of the community and networking of really putting OC on the map for tech. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's been an interesting experience for me because networking really wasn't on my radar. I think it's changed a little bit, but the company that I was at previously in staffing actually kind of frowned upon networking. They didn't see it as building a strong enough relationship with the client when, what I've learned is that there's so many more people. You can't look at networking as I'm going to go in and I'm going to make that one connection and one sale and I'm done, with networking. I think, and that's, I think, a big issue with the way that networking is kind of portrayed. You want to look at it more as like going to the gym. Networking is about building relationships. It's about getting comfortable. And then you're going to see the results of whatever your goals are for networking, whether it's finding a new job, whether it's finding potential clients, whether it's finding potential partners to work with, or just learning more about the tech community. And that's going to come after, weeks and months, of the investment and the time. And so for me, it was one of those things where when I, took the job as the career services, director and, kind of that morphed into a little bit of business development. There's so many beneficial, factors for me to networking. Not only do I have the potential to meet hiring managers, which would be amazing. But on top of that, there's people that I've met who have thought about boot camps and are, potentially could be a student, later on. And then there's what is going on in the Orange County tech scene. And that's been probably the most fun for me to get involved with is, this idea that once again, Orange County isn't seen as a tech hub. We're sandwiched in between LA and San Diego, which LA has Silicon Beach. You have all of these tech companies like Snapchat and Tinder and I think Bird, was started up in LA. And then you've got San Diego, which has, even though it's a smaller city, the San Diego downtown and even up near La Jolla a little bit, like they are really strong tech communities where some of their meetups get, 300-400 people. And then you have Orange County. And Orange County is interesting because it's super spread out. You don't have really a central downtown. There is no downtown. What is downtown Irvine? What is downtown Newport? You have these smaller cities that have downtown, but it's not as if there's really this central hub where all of these businesses are located. Everybody lives and people are crossing paths and having what I love, Carrie Ransom calls them collisions. And so what I've kind of enjoy doing is getting to know the different networking groups, having and finding ways as to how we can also kind of work together too, because that's another thing. I think for a while, networking groups we've got our group and we can't let people, we got to make sure our members are taken care of and we don't want to lose them, to other places. And now you're seeing more networking groups who are collaborating, doing, kind of cross promotion and stuff like that, or events. And over the past few years, it's gone from, this kind of area where, and I think Chris Decker probably really led the charge with OC Tech Happy Hour. And, you have that group, which has been so consistent and core to the tech scene in Orange County. And now you have these other groups that are kind of popping up around it, where, you have Scott Fox and his OC Startups Council, which is a great one. You've got Tech in Motion. You've got Vincent Dev Talks. I've loved being a part of Startup Grind and, really showcasing the companies that are being built here in Orange County. And then most recently, one of the big pushes, Kerry, as I mentioned, he's got a podcast that I'm a big fan of too, called Accelerate OC. Talks a lot about what's going on here in the community. And they just built a venture studio that is kind of this mix of incubator, accelerator, and, venture capital fund that, but it's more about creating a space. And so they do a lot of events. And even with the current work from home situation, I want to say they've been doing about 2 to 3 events per week, which has been really impressive, because that's one of the biggest things we're missing right now is connecting to other people, whether you worked from home beforehand or not, or you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert. I think we're all missing people.
Yeah. I think one thing you said that really stood out to me about networking is like, if you got to view it as going to the gym, right? So being consistent with it, doing it one time and not landing a beneficial relationship and then saying you're done with it is not going to work. But being consistent and being that face that people see all the time, so that when they are thinking of, maybe somebody who can partner or use, your service or product or whatever, then they're going to, be more willing to connect you if they, there's more consistency. And also being more, I think, of what can you bring to the networking event and contribute, rather than like, what can I get or take out of it?
Yeah. Then that's what Startup Grind, that's one of the values, and, that the entire global community of Startup Grind has to adhere to is, give first, ask later. And the other one that I love too is make friends, not connections, because that is really one of the things I've enjoyed too about it is, we have, our work family, we have our at-home family, but, often we're such dynamic people that we look for more, like I play in a kickball league, and then there's the networking groups, and I love hearing what's going on outside of our little, bubble at LearningFuze. And then, you have to look at it as an investment. And with any investment, if you're looking at it as a quick, get rich quick scheme, you should have red flags going off. When you hear about the find one friend and bring in 2 more friends, and then you're going to make it exactly.
Yeah, so, I think that's a lot of, and I'm surprised those type of events are still around, where you got to pay to play, and then you got to bring 2 leads to get 1 lead, or I don't know how they work, but that's I think kind of the general opinion or experience that a lot of people had or think about networking.
Yeah, definitely. And that, that's true, because who does networking most benefit or apply to? It's people who are selling insurance or possibly real estate, or, financial services, because who's their target market? Almost everybody, whereas you are looking for likely, small, medium, large size businesses who are in the market for VoIP services. I'm ideally looking for a development manager, a CTO, a director of engineering, who would be hiring specifically web developers, in the most of the time JavaScript tech stack. And so if we went into this, event, and the reason that I think a lot of people didn't do as much networking beforehand is because you didn't see that direct, who is my target market, who is my, potential customer. And so everybody's fear is they're going to go in, and we've all experienced this. You talk to somebody, and halfway through the conversation, maybe even within 30 seconds, they want to hand you their business card and they want to set up a meeting later on.
Yeah.
That should be red flag number one. But the best part is that those people are becoming fewer and far between. It's not like it's the majority of them. It's now 1 out of every 10.
I think one thing people need to think about for networking is treat everybody the same, right? Same intention, whether your ideal prospect, customer relationship or not, treat them all the same. Because also you never know who knows who, right? So just because they're not your ideal, don't cold shoulder them like, oh, you're not my, person that I need. So I'm going to go try to find them and be a snake about it, right? Just treat everybody the same, build relationships, and it'll all come back tenfold. Yeah.
And then follow up. That's another big one that people forget about is you get those business cards and you put them on your desk, at home. Or you connect with somebody on LinkedIn and that's it, but either check in or just, even a quick message that says, great to meet you is going to make you that much more, memorable. And then when something does come up that they know somebody, you are hopefully in that kind of sphere of somebody they're thinking about.
Right. All right. We're just about out of time here. Thank you so much for your time, TJ. I really appreciate it. I think there's there's some really, good stuff here for people that are, now in the job market. So I'm hoping it helps a lot of people. We appreciate your time. Welcome to the Monster Chats community. And before we let you go, just tell us, where people can find you, connect with you, and then obviously, where they can find out more information about LearningFuze.
Yeah. So LearningFuze, it is spelled a little bit odd. So it's learning and then FUZE.com. So you can find us there. We've got a few YouTube videos out there too that might give people a little bit of, additional insight into kind of the job search and what they can do. And then for me, I'm all over LinkedIn. So it's just first name, last name. So TJ Kinion, last name is spelled Kinion. And I love, connecting with people. Feel free, even if, let's say boot camps aren't your space, maybe, you're looking to make a career change or get into something else, more than happy, to take a look at a resume, a LinkedIn profile, provide a little bit of feedback there. But yeah, and, like I said, with LearningFuze, we've got a lot of information on the website. But if anybody does have specific questions about the programs that we offer, because we've got a few different ones. We've got our full immersion, which is 3 months. Pretty much that's your dedicated focus. And without a doubt that coding is what you want to get into. We've got our part-time classes, which are built for people who can't leave their full-time job. And those are during the week in the evenings. And then a quick 4 hours on Saturday. And then actually really excited because, a lot of people want to get into tech, but coding might be a little bit too much heavy lifting if we're using the gym analogy still. And that was more of the powerlifting side. And then we've actually got a UX UI program that we're launching on Saturday. So really excited about that because user experience, product, management and product development are huge careers and actually grown a lot because, we've gotten past the time when everybody needed a website. Now everybody needs a website that looks really good.
Mm-hmm. And gives a good experience.
Yeah. Gives a good experience, doesn't make you log in right when you join.
Yeah. All right. Well, awesome. Thanks so much. Appreciate it again. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, share, and we're also open to hearing your feedback. The show is all about you, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, TJ.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Monster Chats, presented by Monster VoIP, where we share the tools, methods, and best practices that business leaders use to build new connections, strengthen relationships, and impact sales in organizations of all shapes and sizes. If you have any questions from today's show and want to reach us directly, please text your question to 424-378-6966.